I'm standing in the lobby of my building, flanked by two officers who looked bored and a night security guard who looks terrified. They just came down from the 42nd floor. They told me the office is empty. They told me there is no sign of a struggle, no sign of the man I know was there, and absolutely no trace of the webbing I screamed about on the 911 call. They think I'm hysterical. They think the stress of Fashion Week finally snapped my mind like a brittle thread. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt tighten around my throat. And I know that somewhere in the city, a man is moving through the dark with limbs that have too many joints, looking for me. I need to get this down while the adrenaline is still keeping the shock at bay. I work in what people like to call the industry. It sounds vague, but if you're in it, you know. It's a world built on surfaces, on the drape of a silk charmeuse, the hand of a virgin wool, the aggressive structure of a neoprene bodice. I'm the creative director for a textile design firm that supplies the houses you see in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. And I'm good at my job because I'm cold, I'm precise, and I understand the architecture of materials better than I understand human beings. My office is a glass box in the sky, disconnected from the grit of the street below. We deal in luxury, silence, temperature control, and aesthetic perfection are the baselines of my existence. Or they were, until the archivist started coming up from the basement. I won't use names, not for the company, not for myself, and certainly not for him. Let's just call him the archivist. He started 6 months ago. Our firm has a massive physical archive, swatches dating back to the 1920s, rare lace from Belgium, banned synthetic experiments from the 60s. It's a dungeon of climate-controlled drawers in the sub-basement. He was hired to digitize the collection. The first time I noticed him, I was shouting at an intern about a color mismatch in a dye lot. I was in the communal design space, a vast open-plan room with cutting tables and dress forms. The room went quiet, as it usually does when I raise my voice. But I felt eyes on me, not the fearful eyes of my staff, but a heavy, predatory gaze. I turned, and I saw him standing by the elevator banks. He was pale, not just fair-skinned, but translucent, like a deep-sea fish brought up too quickly. He was tall, incredibly thin, and wore a suit that seemed 2 sizes too big, hanging off his shoulders like it was draped over a wire hanger. And he was staring at my jacket. I was wearing a vintage piece, a structured boucle with a high collar. He walked over, ignoring the intern I'd just reduced to tears, and reached out. Before I could recoil, his fingers brushed my sleeve. His hands were long, the fingers tapering into nails that were perfectly manicured, but slightly yellow. "Tensile strength," he murmured. His voice was dry, like paper sliding over paper. "Interesting weave. The warp is resisting the weft. It's tense." "Excuse me," I snapped, stepping back. Do not touch me. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't even look at my eyes. He looked at his own fingertips, rubbing them together as if savoring the residue of the fabric. The lanolin content is low, he said, more to himself than me. Brittle. You need something with more give, something that binds. Get back to the basement, I ordered. If you need to speak to me, make an appointment. He smiled then. It was a small, tight movement. His lips were thin and colorless. I'm just admiring the casing. It's important to protect the contents. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, he found reasons to be on my floor. I'd find him hovering by the fabric printers, watching the ink soak into the rolls of linen. I'd see him in the break room, standing perfectly still in front of a vending machine, not buying anything, just staring at the reflection in the glass. He was obsessed with protein. That was the other thing. Every time I saw him, he was drinking from a shaker bottle. It was always this thick, viscous, white liquid. It smelled faintly of bleach and raw egg whites. He drank liters of the stuff. I asked his supervisor about it once, casually, and she told me he claimed to have a hypermetabolism that required constant fuel. He's weird, but he's a genius with the fibers, she had said. He can identify a blend just by listening to the sound it makes when you rub it. He's never wrong. I tried to ignore him. I had a fall collection to finalize, and the pressure was mounting. But the gifts started appearing. The first one was on my chair when I came back from lunch. A small square fabric, no bigger than a handkerchief. It was white, shimmering with a pearlescent luster I had never seen before. I picked it up. It was incredibly soft, almost oily, but lighter than air. It felt like holding a cloud. I rubbed it between my fingers. I couldn't identify the fiber. It wasn't silk. Silk has a catch to it, a microscopic friction. This was frictionless. It wasn't synthetic. Synthetics have a plastic warmth. This was cool to the touch. There was a note pinned to it with a silver needle. For the neck, high elasticity, waterproof. I threw it in the trash. I assumed he'd stolen it from the archive. A week later, I found a pair of gloves. Same material, but dyed a deep, bruising purple. I didn't try them on, but I noticed the construction. There were no seams. They weren't knitted or woven. It looked like the fabric had been grown in that shape. I called security that time. They talked to him. He claimed he was just prototyping and wanted the creative director's eye. They let him off with a warning. I should have fired him then. God, I should have fired him. But I was arrogant. I thought he was just a socially awkward weirdo who worshipped my taste. I'm used to people being obsessed with me. It comes with the job title. The turning point was last Tuesday. It was late, past 10 p.m. The heating in the building shuts down to a low hum after 8 to save energy, and my office was freezing. I was wrapped in my coat, shivering, trying to approve a layout for a show in Milan. I realized I had left my scarf in my car. I looked at the corner of my desk. There was a box there. It had appeared while I was in a meeting earlier that day. I hadn't opened it. Desperation makes you do stupid things. I opened the box. Inside was a scarf. It was the same white material as the swatch, but thicker, layered. It looked heavy, but when I lifted it, it weighed nothing. It rippled over my hands like water. I hesitated, but the chill in the room was biting through my blouse. I told myself I'll just wear it for an hour, just to get warm. I draped it around my neck. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. It felt like it was generating its own heat. It settled against my skin with a weight that felt reassuring, like a firm hand resting on my shoulder. It was incredibly comfortable. I went back to work. The shivering stopped. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, a lethargy that smoothed out the jagged edges of my stress. I typed, reviewed, and drank my coffee. An hour passed. I reached up to adjust the scarf, to loosen it a bit. It didn't move. I pulled harder. The fabric seemed to have adhered to my skin like suction. It clung to the curve of my throat. The panic flared in my chest. I went to the mirror in my private bathroom. The scarf looked normal, but when I hooked my finger under the edge and pulled, my skin pulled with it. It was tight, second skin tight. I clawed at it. I dug my nails in. The fabric was incredibly strong. It didn't tear. It barely stretched. Finally, with a grunt of effort, I managed to peel it away from my nape. There was a sound, a wet, Velcro-like tearing sound. I threw the scarf across the room. It landed in a heap, and for a second, I swear to God, it twitched. It slowly settled into a flat pool of white, but that initial movement looked like a muscle relaxing. My neck was red and raw. I touched the skin. It felt sticky. There was a residue on me, a clear, odorless slime that dried quickly into a flaky white powder. I washed my neck for 10 minutes, scrubbing until I bled. I threw the scarf in the trash compactor in the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. I felt heavy. My limbs felt like they were moving through syrup. I had dreams of being wrapped in a cocoon, suspended in the dark, while something massive and many-legged picked delicately at my clothes. The next day, I came in determined to terminate his employment. I didn't care about HR protocols. I was going to throw him out of the building myself. But I couldn't find him. He wasn't in the archive. He wasn't in the break room. I sat at my desk, trying to focus. Around 1 p.m., I ordered a steak for lunch. Rare. I needed the iron. I felt depleted, hollowed out. I was eating at my desk, slicing the meat, when I felt it again. The gaze. I looked up. The glass walls of my office look out over the main design floor. He was standing on the far side of the room, behind a row of mannequins. He was perfectly still, watching me. I froze, a piece of steak halfway to my mouth. He was staring at my jaw as I chewed. Slowly, his jaw moved. He wasn't eating anything. He was mimicking the motion, a rhythmic, grinding rotation of the mandible. His mouth was closed, but the muscles in his cheeks bunched and released in perfect sync with mine. He looked bigger. His suit, usually baggy, looked tighter across the shoulders. His neck looked longer. I dropped my fork. The clatter echoed in the silence of my office. He stopped chewing. He smiled. This time he opened his mouth. His teeth were different. I'd seen them before, normal, flat, human teeth. Now, they looked sharper, pointed, and there were gaps, as if his gums were receding to make room for something else. He raised a hand and pointed at his own neck. He rubbed it, mimicking the way I'd scrubbed my skin the night before. And then he turned and walked away. His walk was wrong. It was too smooth. His upper body didn't bob. He just glided, his legs moving in a blur that my eyes couldn't quite track. I locked my office door. I called security and told them to revoke his badge. I told them he was harassing me. They said they would escort him out the moment they saw him. They never saw him. Fast forward to tonight. It's the end of the quarter. I had to stay. I told myself I was safe. We have keycard access, security patrols, cameras. I'm on the 42nd floor. No one gets up here without a pass. By 9 p.m., the office was deserted. The cleaning crew had come and gone. The lights were dimmed to the emergency track lighting, casting long, skeletal shadows across the rows of desks. I was packing up. I had my bag on my shoulder, I had my hand on the door handle. It wouldn't turn. I frowned and jiggled it. Locked. But it doesn't lock from the outside. I looked through the glass wall. The main floor was dark, but the moonlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated the room in a cold blue wash. The room looked different. At first I thought it was a trick of the light. The air seemed hazy, shimmering. I squinted. There were lines connecting the desks. Fine, glistening threads stretched from the corners of the cubicles to the ceiling. They crisscrossed the room, creating a complex geometric geometry. And in the center of the room, sitting on top of the reception desk, was the archivist. He was crouched, not sitting, crouched. His knees were pulled up to his chest, his arms resting on them, and he was naked. I recoiled, stumbling back from the glass. He turned his head. His eyes caught the light. They reflected it back like a cat's eyes, a bright, chilling green. He hopped down from the desk. He didn't make a sound. He landed on all fours and stayed there. "Open the door," I screamed. my voice cracking. "I'm calling the police," despite knowing he couldn't hear me. He stood up then, slowly, his spine uncurled with a sickening popping sound, like knuckles cracking underwater. He was impossibly tall. His limbs had elongated. His arms hung down past his knees. His skin was stark white, and I could see dark veins pulsing underneath it. He walked to my office door. He wasn't wearing clothes, but he wasn't naked exactly. His skin was covered in a fine, downy white hair, and around his waist, trailing behind him like a train, was a mass of that same white fabric. It was coming out of him. It was spinning from spinnerets located at the base of his spine. He pressed his face against the glass. "The tensile strength is insufficient," he whispered. "The glass is soundproof, but I heard him. I heard him because his voice wasn't coming from the air. It was vibrating through the floor, through the walls. You are fragile," he said. "You break. You tear. You rot." "Go away," I yelled, backing up until I hit my desk. I grabbed the letter opener. It was dull, useless, and grabbed the pocket knife I keep in my drawer for opening fabric bales, a heavy-duty, serrated folding knife. I grabbed it and I flicked it open. "I can fix you," he murmured. "I can wrap you, keep you fresh. The juice stays inside when the casing is tight." He reached for the door handle and just pushed. The metal lock snapped with a loud bang. The door swung open. I ran. My office has 2 doors, one to the main floor, one to a side corridor that leads to the freight elevators. I sprinted for the side door. I burst into the hallway. It was dark. I took 3 steps and stopped. The hallway was a maze. Invisible threads were strung across the corridor at various heights: ankle level, waist level, neck level. They were so fine they were almost invisible, catching the emergency light only when I moved my head. I turned to go back, but he was already in the doorway of my office. He wasn't walking anymore. He was skittering. He moved across the wall, his hands and feet adhering to the drywall, his body defying gravity. He looked like a pale, distorted gecko. "Don't run," he hissed. "Movement degrades the fibers." I had no choice. I dove forward, trying to go under the waist-high threads. I miscalculated. A thread caught my upper arm. It went through my blazer, my blouse, and into my skin like a hot wire. I screamed and yanked my arm back. Blood sprayed. The smell hit him instantly. He stopped moving and froze on the wall. His head snapped towards me. He inhaled deeply. A rattling wet sound. Leakage, he moaned. Precious fluids. He launched himself off the wall. He swung. A line of silk shot from his wrist. Yes, his wrist. And adhered to the ceiling light fixture. He swung toward me in a pendulum arc. I scrambled on the floor, crawling on my stomach to avoid the tripwires. I could hear him landing behind me. The sound of his bare feet slapping the linoleum was wet and heavy. I reached the corner. The freight elevator was 20 feet away. Something wrapped around my ankle. It was soft, sticky, and incredibly strong. I kicked out, but the more I struggled, the tighter it got. I was being reeled in. I was being dragged backwards across the carpet. I clawed at the floor, my nails breaking. He was standing over me. Up close, he was a nightmare of biology. His face was still human, but distorted. His eyes were huge, unblinking. His jaw hung slack, revealing rows of needle teeth. And the smell. It was the smell of the protein shake, amplified 1,000 times. Bleach and rot. Still, he commanded. He began to spin me. He used his hands, moving with blinding speed. He pulled ribbons of white silk from his abdomen and wound them together around my legs. He lifted me up like I was a doll. He spun me. The silk tightened, binding my ankles together, then moving up to my knees. I slashed out with the knife. I cut his arm. It bled a thick, white goo. He shrieked, a sound that wasn't human. It was a high-pitched chittering that hurt my teeth. He dropped me. I hit the floor hard. My legs were bound, but my upper body was free. I slashed at the silk on my legs. The serrated blade sawed through the fibers. It was tough, like cutting through Kevlar, but the knife was sharp. You are damaging the merchandise, he screamed. He was back against the wall, clutching his wounded arm. The white goo was bubbling, hardening into a scab almost instantly. I freed my legs. I scrambled up. He lunged. I didn't run away. I stepped into him. I'm a creative director. I deal with problems head on. I drove the knife into his shoulder. It sank in with a sickening squelch. He roared and backhanded me. I flew across the hall and hit the opposite wall. The wind was knocked out of me, but he didn't follow. He was staring at the knife handle sticking out of his shoulder. He looked confused. Imperfection, he whispered. I didn't wait for him to process it. I ran for the elevator and hit the button. The doors seemed to take an eternity to open. I could hear him behind me. The sound of skittering and of wet slapping. I turned around. He was on the ceiling. He was crawling right above me. His head rotated 180 degrees to look at me upside down. He opened his mouth, and a stream of liquid silk shot out. The elevator doors pinged. I threw myself inside. The silk stream hit the closing doors, splattering against the metal like a gunshot. I hammered the lobby button. As the doors closed, I saw him drop from the ceiling. He landed in a crouch right in front of the gap. He reached in with a long, pale hand. The door clamped shut on his fingers, and he just pulled. The metal doors groaned. They started to bend. He was prying the elevator doors open with his bare hands. I shrank back into the corner, holding my pocket knife, praying the mechanism was stronger than him. The elevator jolted. It began to descend. There was a sickening crunch as his fingers were sheared off by the floor plate. 4 long, pale, severed fingers fell onto the elevator floor. They were twitching. I watched them twitch all the way down to the lobby. They didn't stop moving until the doors opened again. I ran past the sleeping security guard at the front desk, screaming my head off. I ran out into the street. I didn't stop until I saw a police cruiser. Now I'm here. The police went upstairs. They were gone for 20 minutes. When they came down, the lead officer looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Ma'am," he said, "there's no one up there." "Did you see the webs?" I asked, grabbing his arm. "The threads, the blood." He shook his head. "The office is pristine. Cleaning crew must have done a hell of a job. There's no blood, no webs, no giant Spider-Man. But the fingers," I pointed to the elevator. "The fingers on the floor." He sighed. "We checked the elevator. It's clean." "He took them," I whispered. "He took them back to reattach them." "Ma'am, we found a pocket knife on the floor of the hallway. It has white paint on it, and your own blood. We think maybe you cut yourself and had a panic attack." They handed me my knife in an evidence bag. The blade is coated in a dried white crust. They think it's paint. I know it's not paint. I'm looking at the elevator right now. The officers are talking to the night guard, getting my statement. The indicator light for the freight elevator just lit up. It's moving. It's coming down. I'm looking at the glass doors of the lobby. Beyond them is the city, dark and full of alleys. I have my phone. I have my knife. I'm leaving. I'm not going home. He knows where I live. I'm going to a hotel, one with no carpet, high traffic, and bright lights. The elevator just dinged.